Here are my highlights from round 2 of the Sharjah Masters tournament. Yesterday we saw, unfortunately in round 1, a bit of a disaster from Salem Saleh as he marched his king up the board, trying to reenact the famous short Timon game, trying to bring his king to h6. And we saw another echo of that in one of the games from round 2. So I want to start with the game between Puya Idani, who is an Iranian grandmaster, and Rakesh Kulkarni from India. Now, this is a position after 34 moves, and you can see that Black's king is in terrible trouble with this wonderful bishop on f6, just controlling all these dark squares around the king. And it's very tempting to plunge the queen into h6. White could have been more circumspect and just played h3 to just improve his king position before going in, but Idani had calculated it all out. He played queen h6, threatening instant checkmate with queen g7. Now, in order to play this move, you have to do a bit of calculation because you can see this bishop is trained on g2, and well, these next moves are absolutely forced, for Black at least. Black has to play bishop g2 in the hope of exposing White's king and trying to get some kind of perpetual check. So Idani had to think this through very carefully before going in for this. He could play king takes g. He could actually take the bishop here, but that would allow Black's queen into e2, and then White really has to step carefully. But instead he played king g1, which is a nice move. It means that Black has to keep checking, and now the queen isn't on such a good square on this dark square, so it can't come down to e2, for example. Now Black just has to keep checking in the hope that something will turn up. So queen b2 check. The king steps up the board. Now watch what happens with this king. It goes on a little march. Black has to keep checking. Again, another check. And here White is able to cut out the checks with queen f4. Now, unfortunately, it moves the queen away from this devastating square on h6. However, it's worth it, of course, to cover the king, and White is still a piece up, and what a piece, this bishop on f6. So after the queen exchange, for example, this should be a very, very simple win for White. So Black chances his arm. Instead of just moving the queen away or exchanging queens, he plays h5 check. So here we go. The king marches up the board. Black's queen moves away from the exchange, and now king h6. So he's managed to get the king all the way to h6, and it's on such a safe square. This is the funny thing. Not only does it contribute to the attack against Black's king, but actually it's completely safe on h6. You can see the queen covers this diagonal. It just can't be attacked at all. And now White just needs to arrange things. I mean, I think there are several ways to win this position. You could somehow move the rook in, but instead, well, this move e6, of course, is a very natural move, undermining the pawn on g6. We even saw this idea in Salem's game from round 1. So undermining pawn on g6, also incidentally opening up the bishop's line towards the queen. Here Black resigned. Let me just show you one possible continuation. Of course, it's utterly lost for Black, but let me just show you something quite amusing. So queen b3. We take on f7. The rook comes in. Queen f8 check. Don't panic. Rook g7. King h8. Now, the rook can't move because of the pin. However, watch what happens after this. Queen c4. This is a very nice checkmate. And now queen g8. And rook h7. Double discovered checkmate. Beautiful finish. So there we go. A funny echo of Salem's game, but also reminiscent of the short Timon game. That's another one to add to that theme. Right, let me show you another couple of games, and they both involve pawn promotion. So this game is between Srinath Narayanan from India and Garwin Jones, English Grandmaster, who won the Challengers section in Vaikonze in January. So, he's on really good form. So Jones is black here, and he has an extra pawn. Well, someone said in an endgame, if you have a passed pawn, you should push it. And that's what he did here. Very simple strategy. He played pawn to h5. And you can see that white's pieces are all on the other side of the board, and this is an express train. So white has to bring the king over to stop this pawn. Now, you could play h4 here. This is very good for black, but the king can stop the pawn. So what Jones did next was a very nice strategy. First of all, before pushing the pawn again, he brought the rook round and cut the king, preventing the king coming over to stop the pawn, and now we're ready to charge down the board again. And in fact, the finish after this maneuver, very simple but very effective. The finish is very easy. Now, white thrashed around here, but there's really not a lot to do. Pawn pushed again, rook came across, and now pawn number 2. Of course, if rook takes pawn, g4 check wins the rook. And now it's very simple. We're going to bring the knight to h4 to just cut the rook again, and here white resigned. So if knight takes, then h2 and queen its turn, and of course with an extra exchange, that's a very, very simple win for black. Okay, that was quite mechanical, not spectacular, but still a nice maneuver to force the pawn home. This next example is a bit like a study. This is really nice. So this is the game between Nihal Sarin and Arkady Naiditsch. Now, we saw in round 1 that Sarin beat Matthias Blubaum in a superb game, and Nihal Sarin, just 12 years old, a remarkable talent. And Naiditsch, one of the strongest players in the tournament, really struggled in this game today. In the first round, he played Pragnananda, an 11-year-old, and today he's facing a 12-year-old. So Naiditsch not having an easy time. And yeah, as I said, he found this game very, very difficult. In this position, well, he's managed to win a piece. So Naiditsch with black has rook and 2 and a knight against rook and 2. In fact, it's not so simple. You can see that these pawns are under threat from the king. Black's king is way out of the action. And here, if white plays rook c4, just controlling the knight, preventing the knight coming to any decent square, and then attacking the knight will have to move, and then white takes the f-pawn. Well, that is not a simple position to win by any means, and I would say that Sarin still has pretty decent drawing chances there. Instead, he played rook e6, which looks the same. It looks like we're going to force the knight away, and then you take the pawn. But Naiditsch produced a beautiful little trick here. f3, lovely move. Of course, if king f3, knight d4 check forks king and rook. So let's go back. So g takes f3, but now we have another passed h-pawn. Steaming through. Just 2 squares from queening. So obviously if rook takes knight, then h2 and you make a queen. So Sarin tried rook a6. Now it's a tricky little move. He wants to check and then check again and win the rook, but well, there's more than one way to win here. You could play king c8, but Naiditsch selected a study-like move, rook h4, beautiful move. And after king takes h2, the pawn is going home, and here Sarin resigned, because if rook a1, then knight g1, followed by h1 and queen. Nice little finish there, very sharp indeed. So there we go, there's my highlights from round 2 of the Sharjah Masters. Don't forget to check out my other videos on the channel. You can see interviews with some of the players, and we go through some of the complete games that they played. Thanks for watching.